Most people don't ignore danger. They ignore feelings. Not the loud ones. Not fear, not panic. They ignore the quiet ones. The feeling that shows up without explanation. The hesitation you feel even when everything looks fine. The pause that happens before you say yes, even though you already know you're going to. Most of us don't talk about that feeling. We don't even name it. Because it doesn't arrive like a warning. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't interrupt the moment. It just appears quietly and waits. And when it does, our first instinct isn't to listen, it's to explain it away. We tell ourselves we're overthinking, that we're tired, that nothing is actually wrong. We look for proof, and when we don't find any, we move on. What's strange is that this feeling doesn't try to convince us. It doesn't argue. It doesn't get louder when we ignore it. It stays exactly the same. And that's why it's so easy to dismiss, because we've been taught that anything important should be obvious. This feeling isn't fear. Fear is urgent. Fear wants action. This feeling doesn't. It doesn't tell you to run. It doesn't tell you to stay. It simply tells you that something doesn't align. That word, align, matters, because what this feeling notices isn't danger. It notices fit. It notices when a situation requires you to adjust yourself in ways that aren't natural, when you have to stay alert instead of relaxed, when you have to monitor instead of participate, when you have to manage instead of exist. There's nothing wrong yet, nothing you could point to, but something feels slightly off. And because nothing is technically wrong, we assume the feeling must be. We live in a culture that trusts clarity, that values certainty, that rewards decisiveness. This feeling offers none of that. It arrives before logic, before language, before explanation. And because it doesn't come with instructions, we treat it like noise. Most of us learn to distrust this feeling early. We're praised for being reasonable, for being patient, for not reacting emotionally. We're taught that good decisions come from thinking things through, from weighing evidence, from staying calm. So when this quiet sense of wrongness appears, it immediately puts us in conflict with what we've been taught. Because there's nothing to prove, no facts to point to, no argument to make. And without those things, acting on a feeling can seem irresponsible. We worry about being dramatic, about overreacting, about making things awkward. So we wait. We tell ourselves we'll listen later, when it becomes clearer, when it's louder. But this feeling doesn't work that way. It doesn't escalate to meet our standards. It stays subtle, because subtlety is the point. It's not responding to what's happening, it's responding to direction, to where this situation leads if nothing changes. And because nothing has happened yet, we convince ourselves nothing will. There's a moment many people experience but rarely recognize. You're in a situation that looks normal. Everything is fine on the surface. No conflict, no tension anyone else can see. And yet you notice yourself becoming more careful. You choose words more deliberately. You pay attention to timing. You think twice before responding. Not because you're afraid, but because you're aware. At first, this feels like maturity, like social intelligence. You tell yourself this is just how adults operate. But the adjustment doesn't stop. You don't settle into the moment. You manage it. You stay alert. You stay prepared. And without realizing it, you stop asking how you feel and start asking how things look. Leaving crosses your mind, but you dismiss it. Not because you're unsafe, but because you don't feel justified. So you stay, and staying slowly becomes effort. Ignoring this feeling doesn't cause immediate harm. That's what makes it dangerous. The cost shows up gradually, in the way you feel tired without being exhausted, in the way you're present but never fully at ease. You might not feel stressed, but you're always slightly on guard. That low-level alertness takes energy, and over time, it changes how you relate to yourself. You stop trusting your first reaction. You start negotiating with your instincts. You explain yourself out of discomfort. You tell yourself that endurance is strength, that patience is maturity, that staying is the responsible choice. But responsibility, when it replaces honesty, becomes something else. It becomes self-betrayal. Quiet, unnoticed, easy to justify. Until one day you realize that you've been managing your life instead of living it. This feeling is inconvenient because it doesn't align with how we're taught to make decisions. It doesn't wait for consensus. It doesn't care about optics. It doesn't prioritize comfort. It prioritizes coherence. It asks a simple question. Does this fit who you are? Not who you're trying to be, not who you want to appear as, but who you actually are. And sometimes the answer is no. Not because something is wrong, but because something is misaligned. And misalignment doesn't announce itself dramatically. It shows up as tension, as hesitation, as the feeling that you're slightly performing yourself. That performance takes effort, and effort sustained over time becomes fatigue. Fear wants you to escape. Alignment wants you to relax. That distinction matters. When you imagine leaving a situation that doesn't fit, notice what your body does. Often there's relief, not excitement, not certainty, just ease. That ease isn't laziness. It isn't avoidance. It's information. It tells you that you wouldn't need to work so hard to be yourself somewhere else. And the reason that realization feels unfamiliar is because we're taught to value endurance over ease. We admire people who stay, who push through, who tolerate discomfort. We don't talk as much about the cost of that tolerance, about what it requires you to give up quietly. Most people don't ignore this feeling forever. They ignore it until it becomes undeniable, until it turns into burnout, resentment, emotional distance. We wait for proof because proof gives us permission to leave, to change, to choose differently. But this feeling doesn't operate on proof. It operates on awareness. It's not asking you to justify yourself. It's asking you to stop arguing, to stop negotiating with what you already know. And that's difficult because we've learned to trust logic more than ourselves. Listening to this feeling doesn't require certainty. It doesn't require confidence. It doesn't require a perfect plan. It only requires honesty. Honesty about how much effort something is costing you. Honesty about whether you're staying because it fits or because leaving would be uncomfortable. Most people don't regret leaving too early. They regret staying too long. Not because something terrible happened, but because something quiet kept asking to be noticed. This feeling doesn't shout. It doesn't rush you. It waits. And the moment you stop dismissing it, something becomes clear. Not what to do, but what no longer fits. And sometimes that clarity is enough to change the direction of your life, quietly, after everyone sleeps.